The launch of Integrate.io. My name is Paul Lynch. I'm coming at you this morning from San Antonio, Texas. We have some great contributors on the launch event today. In no specific order, we have Donal Tobin. Donal is the chief executive of Integrate.io, and this is in effect his baby. Donal has a long pedigree in terms of B2B SaaS companies, having been the CEO of Xplenty within the developer tool space. Prior to that, Donal worked in the investment community. We have Krithika Ganesamoorthi, who is currently the technical partner lead within Amazon Web Services on a global level. She has vast experience in terms of the areas of e-commerce, both from a technical and from a practical perspective. And we have Derric Haynie. Derric is an e-commerce technologist and contributor. He has significant e-commerce experience behind him with companies like BoxyCharm and most recently Gorgeous. So guys, thank you very much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to your contribution here, and we're really looking forward to hearing your views around Integrate.io and why this specific launch of this specific company has the potential to really disrupt this market. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so without any further ado, I always like to open up these launch events to understand the state of the nation around the particular industry sector which we're looking to address and why it's relevant. So to set the scene, maybe Donal, I can ask you to give me a little bit of insight in terms of, Integrate.io was your idea. And the target market that we're looking at is the e-commerce specific market. Now the tool is broad and it can service other areas, and Xplenty and these tools have done so over the previous year. So, like in your own words, tell me, where do you see e-commerce today? Where it's come from, and we have over the previous sort of 2.5 years, it's been choppy waters. So, where do you see us today?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. So I think from e-commerce perspective over the last 2.5 years, seeing huge, unprecedented growth, I guess, largely driven by COVID itself. But from that perspective, it's just brought these e-commerce companies into huge revenue growth and sort of, unexpected for that part. And so as we look at the integration piece of that, it's a very fragmented market right now. And so from us speaking with customers, what really stood out to us was that they were using, from the integration standpoint, they're using multiple different platforms to get data connected from their siloed sources. And so they're using platforms, they're also having to write their own APIs and that to connect to these things. So very fragmented, using across multiple products, using their own team itself. And so where it really stood out for us was just that customers need to get into their data centralized and into a single source of truth. And around a data warehouse, that just was proven very difficult for these e-commerce customers. And so that's where the idea for Integrate.io to really go down and be a data warehouse integration platform specifically built and designed for e-commerce came from. And that's where we are today and what we're building.
That's great. And as far as sort of maybe Derric to talk to you in terms of your background with Gorgeous and stuff, prior to COVID, there was a huge shift in terms of retail and in terms of shopping. Not necessarily everyone moving away from your traditional bricks and mortar, but there was a massive uptake in terms of e-commerce where, you saw the sort of the middle market, your Macy's of the world, if you will, if you're in the United States, getting squeezed. Would you agree with that for starters? And if so, how has COVID sort of impacted that kind of area?
Well, yeah. But even before COVID, you were seeing the rise of D2C or the digitally native vertical brand. So it was there, and new brands were coming. You could think of Dollar Shave Club as one of the early pioneers of that. Now I think they've been around like 10, maybe even a little bit longer years. But what happened also was a missed mark by Macy's and other retailers in the assumption that foot traffic would continue. And we already saw declines in foot traffic as there was a natural progression to buy from my couch, right? Like I can do my shopping online. I don't need to do that. So that was already occurring in the USA prior to COVID. COVID, of course, shut down all the foot traffic. And then you had something really interesting. There was a power shift because direct-to-consumer brands that were already rising and growing had this great relationship on social media with their customers. They had very low retail presence, which means low cost and being wasted from them. And so they were able to really thrive, whereas Macy's, JCPenney, Sears, a lot of department stores had very poor communication with their customers outside of the retail experience. They didn't have their email addresses. They didn't have their phone numbers. None of them, they weren't getting followed on social media because their social media accounts weren't as cool, young, and hip as maybe somebody like Timbuktu or Chubby's. I don't know if you guys follow these brands, right? So because of that, direct-to-consumer had a significant advantage for the last 2.5 years. And e-commerce, I believe 45% or something like that was the boom in 2020. And so it makes a lot of sense why it happened. You know, COVID was the accelerant for it, but I think we saw that shift there. And retailers just missed the mark in not being prepared by having like personally identifiable information, stronger membership programs. They've tried some of these things, you know, so everyone has a Macy's rewards card or an Express membership card, but there's just still some, I don't know, natural disconnect that I think we can, I don't know, I feel it like on a tangible level, if that makes sense. Like as a consumer, I don't relate to, I like Express, I like shopping there, but I don't relate to them the same way I relate to some of my online brands. So
I completely agree with you. I think you said something which is very interesting. All of these brands weren't prepared for this enormous tsunami of business and activity that was about to hit them. So, Krithika, like coming from the technical perspective and the AWS perspective, how could have they better prepared? I mean, no one saw COVID coming. When we closed our office in March of 2 years ago, we did so for 2 weeks. Here we are 2 years later, without an in-person event. So, you know, I'd ask you, coming from the technical side and what you saw with your partners, you know, how could they have better prepared?
Right. Yeah. So thanks, Paul. Thanks for that. And then I agree with Derric and Donal in terms of, you know, COVID just accelerated how customers adopted technology. I want to give you a little bit of background on just e-commerce in general. You know, I think that'll help explain the context of, you know, how we're seeing the shift. So if you look at like 2000s and all e-commerce, you know, the technology was mature enough. You know, you had RESTful APIs, you know, you have a lot of like e-commerce vendors. They were driving down the cost, a lot of innovation. And then like 2010s is very similar to that. And then at that point, data became a very critical decision maker. And then that's when a lot of customers and retailers realized that, you know, they need to invest. You know, technology is just not an afterthought. It's an important aspect of business strategy decision making because of the amount of data you've collected. And to understand your customers better. Then when you look at what happened with, you know, Amazon Web Services, you know, with the launch of cloud, a lot of retailers are moving to the cloud. And if you look at our customer base and if you look at what COVID did to them, the customers who were actually on our platform, on Amazon Web Services, on AWS already, they were actually able to innovate faster and keep up with the changing demands and what they saw with the customers. For instance, just buy online and pick up in store. I mean, we've all experienced that. I mean, we all wanted that, you know, easy access to, you know, to delivery. And BOPIS increased by 67% in 2021 compared to 2020. And we have a lot of our customers and partners. They were able to adapt because they were actually architected. You know, the core of the platform and foundation is on cloud, which lets them go agile and lets them innovate faster. So we saw a lot of customers being able to adapt to those changes much more faster than customers who are traditionally on-prem and they were just trying to migrate. That's not to say that they were not able to adopt, you know, has helped a lot of customers, you know, embrace certain aspects of technology to, you know, help offset the business faster. For instance, Amazon Connect, which is a, you know, virtual call center. You know, we have a lot of examples where retailers, you know, had to scale up the, you know, the call centers because customers were calling in and figuring out where's my order, how do I order, is your shop open, can I come in, what happens to my loyalty status, do I get benefits? So we saw a lot of customers just adopting some of our solutions like Connect, like, you know, just like a platform itself, and able to, like, you know, ramp up and innovate and then keep up with the, you know, changing demands. And then the last but not the least, you know, I also want to talk about, you know, how some of our services in terms of technology, like machine learning, I know we hear about it a lot, but then we actually saw it in practice, especially when it came to fashion retailers. You know, I mean, you know, as we know, at the last, you know, when COVID started hitting, people, they stopped buying fashion clothes. I mean, they were not buying as much as they had to. So what happened is a lot of fashion retailers had to like sort of rethink their strategy and then understand, what do I do with all my excess inventory? What should I be doing? Can I run machine learning models to predict and let me know what those markdown optimization or markdown cost needs to be? How can I dynamically price? What can I do with my supply chain? So we saw a lot of those decision making being done faster because they were already on cloud and they were able to leverage some of our services. I know that it was offered.
I love it, and I think the overriding theme that we're seeing here is around data. And around data being absolutely crucial in terms of your ability to adjust to this new dynamic. Like it would bring me on to start talking about sort of the deeper technology stack and data warehouses. But before I do that, I'd love to get a view, like with three experts here at this launch, where's this going to go in the medium term? Like we saw enormous uplift in terms of, businesses like Zoom, and we saw huge IPO valuations around delivery apps like DoorDash, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen a drive towards Drizzly and Bevmo if you're in Australia. But this Hopin with a valuation of 5.25 billion for remote conferencing, are we going to see a flattening out? Is this going to be a soft landing? Donal, I'll go back to you. I mean, and this doesn't even need to be presented as an industry expert around e-commerce. It's more an opinion with each of your backgrounds in terms of where this goes.
Yeah, I think it's there's definitely going to be some slowdown, some like deceleration of the growth we've gone through. But at the same time, like people are accepting the new normal now, right? And it's across everything, right? From if we're talking about e-commerce, it's just people are so used to being able to order and get something the next day versus having to go to a store and pick up in person, or as Derric said, order from the couch, right? It's that ease of use that when you get used to it, it's hard to train yourself to convince yourself to do otherwise, right? And so I think from that perspective, it's around to stay in terms of this ease of use. Also, there will be some people do prefer to go in store, they're going to meet up with people to do that, right? That can be done, and that will start to come back when we get to the end of this COVID run. But for the same time, I think it will definitely there will be continued growth within the space, given that people just are used to it, and they want the ease of use focused around that.
Derric?
Yeah, I think about this from the proliferation and consolidation of technology, specifically e-commerce technology. 25 years ago, there were maybe a couple of dozen e-commerce technology platforms. So why would we need, an aggregator and an integrator for them? It would have been all custom and small. But here we're looking at 15,000 apps. Over 70 apps are launched every week on the Shopify App Store alone. This is a lot of data silos that are going to be created. And so you're going to need a connector for all of them, right? You're going to need a tool like Integrate to bring it all together. And then most importantly, make sense of the data so that it's coming into the warehouse in an organized fashion. We already kind of hinted at the value of this data being astronomical for brands large and small. And I also believe there's a democratization of data, meaning that even as a small brand with $1 million in revenue, I can actually get great insights and make more money if I have my data aggregated, organized, and presented to me to give me predictive insights and so forth and so on. So it's becoming easier for everybody to use it. And that's why we need a tool like this that's bringing it all together. Now, in the medium term, we also see a bit of consolidation. There are, for the first time ever, a handful of roll-up funds, a WeCommerce or with Assembly, that's trying to bring under one house 7 or 8 major technologies. And this could be, in the future, all-in-one platforms. All-in-one platforms are a natural threat to somebody like Integrate, but don't actually necessarily solve for the same thing as a data warehouse. They just make it that so that you need less integrations in total. I see those being relatively successful in marketing automation and a few other places, but at the same time, there'll never be one app for literally everything because there is just too much innovation going on out there. You think about predicted landing page times and Amazon functionality, buy by 5 p.m., get it tomorrow. You can actually, that's what democratized. I'm an advisor for a company called Phoenix Commerce that can do things like that. A lot of marketing automation platforms will never enter that space. There's a tool called route that does order tracking, shipping, insurance. Like you can't cover all of your bases. So you'll always have a tool stack of 10, 20, 30 tools. And I think it expands, of course, as the organization expands. So we'll always need to integrate things, but there will be some of those components that do consolidate, kind of making it easier to manage the whole stack. At the end of the day, though, any place that's creating a data silo is a threat to an organization. And within 5 years' time, maybe the death of the data silo. That's my medium run prediction. No more data silos. 5 years' time. We'll see, though.
I think moving across to Krithika, I mean, if there's one company, in terms of technology terms, that is pulling data silos down and managing that data, it's Amazon Web Services. So I'm quite sure that I'm not going to get a dissenting voice from you.
Right, definitely. So if you look at, I mean, just from what we see in the industry, right, like as Derric just mentioned, a lot of companies are getting to be more a data-driven organization. And then in terms of your question, Paul, are there some of these behaviors, what is short-term versus long-term? Even in retail, a lot of those behaviors that we see, I think has become the new normal. I think Donal referred to that as well earlier in his comment. And for instance, grocery shopping, like I personally didn't have groceries delivered online before COVID, but now that's become a norm for me. That's not to say everybody's going to go that way. I think that's going to be a new normal where, there's going to be a lot of adoption. What that means is also from a technology perspective, we see a lot of customers, as I talked about machine learning earlier, the next is whole robotic automation. Like, how do I get my warehouses closer to my customers? What can I do? How can I do the next day delivery faster? And to be able to do all of this, data is important because you need to understand who your customers are, what their preferences are. Do they like to shop online? Do they like to go pick up in store? What do they like to buy? Can you be, proactive in their shopping decisions? And can you make the shopping decisions much faster? In online as well, right? How do you create more engaging experiences? So everything sort of like data becomes a foundation for an organization to be able to slice and dice that customers, expectations and behavior, so you can actually create these long-lasting relationship with your customers, right? I mean, it's not just about getting the customer one time. As we all know, customer acquisition is very expensive. So it's not just bring them one time and you're done. No, you need to make sure they come back again and again and again to your site. So you have to build this long-lasting relationships, that and keep up with the brand promise. So for all of that, I would say like data becomes the key. And I mean, I'm happy to dive deep as we go through this to just talk about different data platforms and what we do in terms of helping customers just get all this data collected and all in one place.
Well, let's do that. I mean, and maybe Krithika, let me keep you on the spot here. You got to go third last time round, so we'll push you out front and center and make you go first. Like this is Derric, when you're talking about 70 apps being launched within Shopify's App Store on a daily basis, it reminds me, if I go back, say, 3 to 4 years ago, in terms of the rise of marketing automation tools in B2B SaaS, where every other week I was seeing a new marketing automation tool coming out. Now, that's to be expected as we saw like huge amounts of funnel optimization and a sort of a shift or a disruption in terms of business practices. So like with this huge rise in terms of apps and e-commerce tools to strive towards data, Krithika, how is the data warehouse how's it managing this? This is an area where I've seen enormous disruption, and also like from an investor perspective, I've seen very, very, very strong valuations and increase in valuations in terms of the businesses operating in this space. So maybe give us some insight in terms of how the data warehouse has evolved.
Certainly. So, as Derric mentioned earlier, the influx of data is tremendous because, you have different channels, different ways that customers interact with you. You have real-time data, you have structured, you have unstructured data, just data is in all forms and shapes that, come into, and you have to make decisions out of that, right? I mean, it's one thing to, have all the data, but then like, how do you act on it? To be able to do that, if you look at just the data warehouse evolution, you had, data warehousing like IBM Netezza, Oracle Exadata. And then as the data started growing and the use cases became very different, and then, and what you want to do with the data also increased in a lot of like data science and machine learning, the customers started to figure out what is next. And that's when, if you look at our evolution in terms of our services, our data warehouse application, which is Amazon Redshift, and you could see a lot of customers moving away from those on-prem into Amazon Redshift, and the reasons being the ability, cost becomes an important factor as well. You have all these different data, which means it's going to become expensive to store and also to compute. And then you also want to be able to scale, because again, you might have a D2C channel today, but tomorrow you might be selling on marketplaces, an Amazon marketplace. Maybe you're starting selling in wholesale. So you have all these data coming in from all of these places. So that's how Amazon Redshift. So Amazon Redshift is a scalable data warehouse application on cloud. And not just that, the way we look at, when we look at our services in AWS, we always say that, one use case doesn't fit all. Data warehouse is one aspect of your analytical platform, but then you have different use cases and you want different data types. So we have over 15 purpose-built databases, starting from relational to NoSQL to our data warehouses. Together, they help customers create this modern data architecture. And then another important factor is, as you said, there's so many apps, data coming in. You need to be able to collect get all these data into this common repository, which we call a data lake. Which is why platforms like Integrated IO comes in picture, because you have different platforms, right? And how do you get all the data in and in a meaningful way and make sure that that is a source of truth? So which is why we lack. I wouldn't say that we need tools like Integrated IO that can get all these data into this one place. And once you get that data, then depending on the use case it is, use your data warehouse or your data lakes. To be able to act on that data. I just want to finish off with a few other things in terms of just technology evolution itself. If you look at a few years ago, even from our services standpoint, we had Amazon Redshift, we had S3, which is the object store, which is the data lake. But then as we started working with customers, the way they access the data, even within the data warehouse, changed. We have services like Amazon Athena, which helps you access data in a data lake directly. So even if you have your data in your object store, which is your S3, and you want to access something, you had services like Athena, which you can actually use SQL queries to access the data. Then we saw customers saying, hey, yeah, I have data in my data warehouse because those are structured data. I want to do a certain analytical with it. But then I also want to combine data, which is in my object store. How do I do all of this? And then we have a new service called Amazon Redshift Spectrum, and that's what it does. It helps customers access data in the data warehouse and also in their objects simultaneously to be able to act on that. So the evolution of use cases and services, as you see, has evolved based on what customers want to do with the data, just because of the influx of data that is there.
Super interesting. One of the areas that you mentioned is cost. Now, I don't want to go to necessarily to cost, because I find it can often end up as being a bit of a rabbit hole. But what I will say as far as Amazon Web Services is concerned is that consistently since launch in 2005, 2006, it's an area which you guys have really disrupted. The way you charge, how much you charge, it's a huge disrupting factor. Now, I go back to operational days within the tech stack world, and data warehousing was an expensive kind of solution. So the peripheral kind of ways we remediated this was the tools we use to bring data in and out of the data warehouse. So Donal, can I ask you to talk a little bit around how these kind of technologies are changing on the back of the likes of Redshift and those kind of disruptive cost models and those kind of engaged technologies entering the space, and what Integrate's doing to sort of answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you look at, if you go back 10, 20 years ago in terms of data warehousing, right, it was a very expensive tool or a piece of technology within your stack. And that was largely driven by the cost of actually managing these, right? And then as we did come into the cloud evolution, the cloud data warehousing, the likes of Redshift, really the price of actually running these really dropped significantly, made it a lot more affordable for companies. And then also the billing models themselves changed, right, from storage and a compute standpoint with these. And this allowed companies to shift where they were doing a sort of ETL to do any transformations, data filtering before going into the data warehouse. That was making sure that they were minimizing their costs. They were only paying for data in there that needed to be in there versus having anything else as additional. And then with the change now moving to the cloud data warehousing, where a lot more cost efficient, it's allowing the way that we are interacting with data warehouses to change too. And so we're now seeing over the last few years a shift towards an ELT model, which is companies replicating all of their data sources into their data warehouse and then doing the transformations inside our data warehouse. You have stuff like DBT, again, raising huge amounts of money, getting big valuations, and being adopted by the whole community to be that tool for the transformations with the data in the data warehouse. And so with that, that's over the last sort of 5-6 years, we've seen that trend. Now what we're starting to see is a trend from the data warehouse being seen as like a data storage mechanism where it's used for reporting analytics to actually becoming a full data platform. And so what I mean by that, it's becoming where it's like now sitting at the center of the enterprise and becoming like the heartbeat of the company. And so we're seeing customers want to bring data into their data warehouse to do BI reporting, etc., but then also bring the data back out of the data warehouse and into like operational systems. So customers are looking to put data into like Salesforce, NetSuite. In e-commerce, we see them wanting to put their data into the ad platforms. So like uploading stuff like custom audiences, like shopping cart abandoned lists to get those into their channels. So your Facebook ads, your TikToks of the world, to get those in. And again, it's like all sitting around the data warehouse. And then the last piece we're seeing of that is customers looking to build APIs on top of the data warehouse and power systems, right? So again, looking at the e-commerce, we have customers that are using us for building stuff like product recommendation tools, right? And they're taking the data that they've collected in their warehouse based on past customer usage, and then trying to predict what the next person will buy for that, or what they should push out as a recommendation for the products in there. And so when we look at what we're building at Integrate.io, we have on the ingestion side, we have your ETL, we have CDC for database replication, and then we also have your ELT. So it's like giving the customer the complete choice of what they want to use to get data into their data warehouse. And then once it's in the data warehouse, we have, again, to take data back out. It's like reverse ETL is sort of the trend of the buzzword around that, is we have the connectors there to let you push your data back out to your operational systems. And then last piece is around the API generation. So we have an instant API generation product that, again, allows you to spin up an API on any of your data warehouses within 5 minutes with that. And then again, that's what's been used to power applications and microservices for it. So overall, we're seeing this a big shift in, I guess, the way the data warehouse is used, and like it really becoming the center of the company and being a critical piece for that, where everything gets passed through it.
I love when we spoke previously, Donal, the analogy that you used was it was the heartbeat of the business. Where previously your data storage or your data warehouse, or however you introduced this into your stack, was, people held data from a compliance perspective because you needed to produce this. If further down the track you found yourself in a sticky situation around a pending legal suit or something. So I love this. With the likes of Integrate.io, with the fabric that you were running around this in terms of putting data in, irrespective as to the tools that you would previously have used, which were cost driven, ELT, ETL, et cetera, taking it out with reverse ETL. It's a really, really interesting kind of change in terms of how I would have grown up in technology and how we would have looked at these kind of data warehouse solutions. So, I mean, I guess my question, and it's not something that I'm grasping to understand, is when it becomes applicable to e-commerce companies. Maybe Derric, can I put this to you? Like, I mean, when within the life cycle, is this a small startup? Is this a giant entity? Like, I mean, not Amazon Web Services, but Amazon, store. I mean, when does this become an applicable solution for an e-commerce company? And I know this is a bit of how long is a piece of string, Derric? So, and I'm probably putting you on the spot, so I apologize for that. But, give it a stab.
Yeah, no, I mean, my entire business is centered around understanding when to use technology and when a brand should be adopting something like this. Certainly, I suppose it really centers around your source of truth. How true is your source of truth? So, as I talk to a lot of Shopify merchants, the back end of Shopify is a reasonably good source of truth for up to a few million in revenue, or until you've launched retail, or maybe you've got Amazon and Etsy and other channels starting to take off, or direct selling on Instagram, right? So all of a sudden Shopify stops becoming my source of truth, and I need like business intelligence for that. Now, as my business intelligence platform needs the data, you find out all these problems. Oh, it's not pulling in the data properly. It's not storing it properly. And that's when, of course, I'm looking to invest in building out my own data warehouse for this. So there's layers of complexity that need to be added for this to become valuable. And that naturally is just an indicator of how true is my existing source of truth. And as that number, as a percentage goes down, and you're like, oh, this is only seeing into 20% of my business, that's a big problem, right? And hopefully it never even gets that low. And then perhaps on the flip side of that, there are some I've met with one out of 300 brands that I met with, early stage startups that are venture backed. If they've raised good amount of venture backing and they have strong experience in retail and they know that they're going to go omni-channel, it is something you could invest in from the very beginning, like almost before customer zero, and think about how you might have a good architecture for data and being able to use that data because you know you're high growth. But usually that is a very early investment, and usually you can get away with more simpler solutions until you hit 2 million, 5 million, 10 million in revenue, and you're closing large retail operations and stuff like that. So usually I don't say do it from the beginning. You should be growing into it as you start to realize that you don't have clear transparency into your own business.
Super answer. Krithika, what do you think? Would you see the same kind of trending? Or?
I would, and I think I also want to add that I think what AWS, Amazon Web Services, helps customers do is the ability to actually launch things faster and sooner, even if you don't have a lot of data science experience or machine learning experience. Our goal is to democratize the way customers or companies use data to actually get insights. So from our standpoint, I mean, we see customers across the board, mature enterprises who've done data for a decade now, or as newer customers who are just starting out their journey and trying to figure out what to do. So they're able to actually quickly leverage the tools that we have in place to actually test the market out. You don't have to boil the ocean of doing every single use case, that's needed to be done to get insights out. But you can actually start simple, at least. I think it was Derric who mentioned, there's just like getting all the data into one place, like a single source of truth. So, with the easy access of AWS services and also partner solutions like Integrate, we see customers, the SMBs, even the SMB customers, trying to figure out, okay, how do I make sense of the data and make data-driven decisions? So we see them using some of our services to be able to do that, because it's ease of use. You just go click a button, you launch something, you with the help of partners, you get the data in, then you start making sense of it, right? So you have all these different tools and partner solutions in place to be able to do that. So that's what we've been seeing. And then I can also tell you that when we start having conversations with customers about just data, like modernization and transformation, digital transformation, one of the first workloads we see is e-commerce, and then in parallel data, setting up a data platform is by far, I think, some of the first investments that we see companies actually make at AWS, because they understand that it's important and it's critical. So they want to actually start off that. So those are the two critical workloads that we see customers starting off of with, when they talk about digital transformation.
Well, I think there's no better motivation than necessity, and what COVID has taught us is that if business must prevail, we need to keep moving forward in the face of these kind of challenges that we're faced. So there's no better motivation than that, and I think ultimately when we spoke about how long, what does it look like going forward? Will there be a balancing out and stuff like? Clearly, there has been a demographic change in terms of how we engage with the internet and how we engage with e-commerce based entities. So, we are going to continue to see growth with this. So, the newer businesses, Chubbly, et cetera, moving forward, that have really engaged around the data and have moved with it. Your Dollar Shave Club, albeit a 10-year-old entity, these are the guys that will prevail in this new reality. Because they're utilizing their data in such a sense that they're now gaining real customer insight. I love the machine learning components. I love AI around these kind of technologies. I think from an investor perspective, I'd say 9 out of the 10 businesses that I see that are advertising the fact that they have AI or ML don't have it. But I think this is changing. And I think innovation, that COVID is requiring is driving that. So, I think, Donal, I'd ask you in terms of, who should use your product, but I think I would just be opening up the forum for you to say everybody. So rather than bring you into this, let's talk a little bit deeper about Integrate.io. This is after all a launch event. Okay. So, what was the compelling motivation around Integrate.io? Can you give us an idea around that? Why suddenly is Integrate.io required for launch today when it mightn't have been 6 months ago? So talk to us about why Integrate.io and what brought you down this path.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing we've seen is obviously over the last 2.5 years, even pre-COVID times, the rise of e-commerce, and as companies grow, so too do their data sources, and so too do their data silos. And so, with that in place, over the last 12 months in particular, we've been speaking with a lot of our customers and even just e-commerce companies in general. And I know the recurring complaint or the difficulty is getting all that data into a single source of truth. And so, it's not going back to sort of when you're discussing like who should use it or when's a company stage to use it. Like it's we challenge to see like define a certain revenue of that, but no, Derric mentioned sort of 2 to 5 up to 10. That's when we start seeing these needs. And what we actually see is like when customers are selling on say multiple sales channels, right? So they're on Amazon, they're on Walmart, multiple marketplaces. That's when again it's bringing those together to have that single report. Single source of truth for your for revenue, for stock, etc. For revenue stock with that. And then the other piece is when we see a lot of customers that they have multiple stores in multiple different currencies, and again just trying to normalize that all back, bring it into that single source of truth, get it into whatever your reporting currency is, and then again just be able to use that for company-wide reporting. So those are the real use cases for it, and where we see customers come in to use it. And we're seeing with Integrate.io is it's helping to democratize the whole e-commerce space in terms of data. It's a low-code solution. It's both aimed or used by both technical users, but also non-technical users, right? So these are business users who want to use that data. Just previously, they weren't able to get the connectors out there to do that. What we are doing is obviously building what the connectors out there today are, but then also having the ability to add new connectors as customers come in, right? And so within the space of a few days, when a customer's in a trial with us, they're saying, hey, we need to connect to X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, great. If we support 4 to 5 currently, we'll have that next one, the last one you need, by the end of this week. And so it's having that ability to scale with the customers and to keep meeting their needs as they grow as well. And so I think just the growth that's gone through in terms of e-commerce over the last year, over the last year or two has been, it was definitely sort of unexpected, unprecedented. I think like a lot of the data integration companies have sort of been a bit left behind in terms of keeping up with that. And so that's what we're here today to do, to be that integration layer around your data warehouse for the e-commerce space, and then to continue to grow with them as the space evolves and continues to grow.
I love it. I mean, like where I see you guys and Krithika and Derric, I'll go to you in a second. But where I sort of see Integrate.io sitting is like, it's at the intersection of this explosion of data. Okay. And it is an explosion. I mean, I've seen statistics saying that by 2060, the amount of data in the world is going to double every 2 hours. So this enormous explosion in terms of data and how we manage it, this data being like as a hoster. So, in a previous existence, I owned and CEO'd hosting companies. So we, at some weird point in time, perhaps, Krithika, we may have competed, but if anyone ever competed with AWS. But the one thing above everything else that we feared was data loss. We would have an issue in terms of our network or our infrastructure. And the first question we'd ask ourselves is, have we lost customer data? Yet the reality is, of the data that's generated by enterprises today, the vast majority of this goes unlooked at, So what excites me about Integrate.io is at this intersection of sort of e-commerce and that explosion and the explosion of data. And it's that democratization is around empowering companies to take the 80-85% of data they're generating and meaningfully use it. And not just for, analytics perhaps in small amounts, but for, BI, for real kind of exercises with APIs through Integrate to use this and drive it into microservices and really become the heartbeat. So, like, is there one thing about Integrate that that sort of excites you, Krithika, in terms of what they're doing and how they're interacting with Amazon Web Services?
Yeah, I think as Donal mentioned, right, the entire ETL process, the data is in all these sources. How do you get them all into this data lake? And then the other thing also is understanding those data sets, like from e-commerce. What is a transaction like? Okay, what is promotion? So understanding the nuances of the data that come from all of these places is important. I think Integrate IO understands that space, so they're able to easily translate that into a usable data formats for customers, which is going to be a bigger task to access every single data source, understand what the data schema is. And then the data governance is another big aspect, and I think that is something that integrated IO brings in, because yeah, it's one thing to get all the data, but if you have different definitions of the data, if you don't know who's accessing the data, what they do with the data, I mean, that is actually a nightmare. And I think integrated IO sort of brings everything all in one place, solves some of the data governance, data translation, data understanding, and also data security, right? I mean, data breaches is happens all the time, and you need a strong partner who can not only help you get all the data in one place, but then make sure the data is secure. At any given point of time, exactly who has access to, and if they should have access to it. There's also finer access control policies and all of that. I think integrated IO brings all of these into like this one mechanism, which makes it simpler. And then the other thing also I want to mention, I think it's important call out that Donald said earlier about the product was, it's not just getting data in. Once you get the data into the warehouse, you get it in a format, okay, where else can it go to, right? So managing that entire outflow of the data is critical as well. And I think integrated IO is nicely positioned to bring all of these aspects together. So.
Derric, well said, Krithika. I love it. Your view, any specific things about this launch that makes you excited?
Yeah, absolutely. What I think, and the reason I started my current business is because I knew that businesses, especially e-commerce merchants, had opportunity to really use different technology products. I mean, this is a new solution. It didn't exist 3 years ago. And when I was in-house at a beauty box subscription, we had a data warehouse. We had an entire team dedicated to what this tool does almost instantly. There's 5 people that could be fired as soon as you find this product and implement it. And firing people isn't a great thing, but we're displacing many jobs that are just essentially multiple organizations doing the same task that, and so if we can do that task in one place once and then democratize, sell it to everybody at a fraction of the cost, we're really streamlining what our resources can be doing in an organization. Of course, that's great for margin. It simplifies the business as a whole. It allows us to focus on solving the problems with our data instead of solving our data problems. And so there's a lot more that can be done. It allows businesses to move faster. And like I said, the democratization, it allows smaller and smaller organizations to be just as powerful as larger organizations. So that's what I absolutely love about it, is the resource displacement makes the product a no-brainer for anybody in this situation.
I love it. I mean, I think in a labor crisis like we're facing, we repurpose staff, Derric. We don't fire them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they would go on to other things.
We can streamline and repurpose.
One more thing really quick worth noting is time to market, essentially, time to use this data. When I had to go to my team of 5 and ask for certain data sources to be pulled in, aggregated, and then pushed out to reporting tools, it would take weeks to turn that around, weeks. And we would miss campaigns. Like I'm on the marketing and growth side usually, or in that business, and so we would miss campaigns and deadlines. The insights would come in way too late, and it's the old driving the car through the rearview mirror kind of problem. We're like way behind, and so instantly having it's not just about displacing the team and making it more resource efficient, but it's also about having it done in a day instead of a month.
I love the concept that as a tool, it's in some way leveling the playing field. So it's making smaller new entrants that want to be successful as they come into this space. It's giving them a comparable sort of platform to compete against larger, more established ones. And if, by adopting this and getting rid of those or repurposing those teams, as we joke about, it's making them more efficient. So, in many ways, an early adaptation of something like this could put them in a strong competitive position against a larger competitor where they can win. So that idea of leveling the playing field, I think it's great. So I guess, Donal, not asking you to go full on sales pitch here now. Mind you, we could already be there. How do we work with you? If people are interested in working with Integrate.io, how do we go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically customers come into us on Integrate.io, they'll sign up and schedule time to speak with one of our team. And with that, the goal is really just to understand the use case and ensure there's a fit for what they're looking to achieve. And then once they sort of validate that, they go into a 7-day trial or pilot. And during that, really the goal is just to ensure that we can solve the problem they're looking to solve, right? And so connect to the right connectors, do the right transformations, whatever is needed just to show that it is the right tool for them. And during that time, they're assigned a dedicated support engineer. And so they are working alongside them, right? Teaching them through the platform, walking through it. And then at the end of 7 days, it's sort of, okay, we've identified there's a good fit and move forward into that. And then go forward. Once we go forward after a 7-day trial, we then go into they sign on as a new customer and they go into a tailored 90-day onboarding. And again, sort of they have a dedicated success engineer after that time. And really the goal is to help them during those 90 days to get into fully production in terms of their pipelines and what they want to achieve. And so typically what we do see with customers is anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks from the time they come to speak to us, they have all their pipelines into production, their data stack is up and running. What we see in the market now, sort of again, the pains we were seeing with customers was that they were it's so fragmented right now out there in the market, right? In that you use one tool for your ELT, you use another tool for your governance, you use another tool for your reverse ETL, something else for API management. And so really just that whole process goes from what should be 4 to 8 weeks on the high end to 6 months, and they're still not decided on a reverse ETL tool. So our whole thing is, our whole Integrate.io, the whole reason for being there is one, the connectivity part of it, but also that unified platform, right? So it's your complete integration layer around the data warehouse. And then it's what we see with customers now, it's accelerating that time to impact, right? So Derric touched on earlier, it's really getting the data when they need it rather than in another 4 weeks or 8 weeks based on the data team's other priorities, other requirements. So it's put it in the hands of people who want it tomorrow versus waiting for those months to get that data.
It's great. So before we finish here, okay, I'm going to put each of you on the spot, and I'm going to start with Krithika. Okay, we've seen the COVID spikes, we've seen Omicron. So, let's say we're getting back to a level of normal, say in 12 months. Give me some predictions. As we move towards, I know I'm doing the same thing. I'm touching wood. Like as we move forward beyond 2023, give me some predictions about e-commerce. Maybe one prediction about e-commerce that and something that you're seeing a trend heading towards. That's going to be of interest to all the attendees here. And don't be pushing Bitcoin.
No, not the way everything is going on with the market now. I think I touched upon this earlier. I wanted just within retail, there's just multiple segments. If you look at just grocery in general, I think I think some of those trends that we saw earlier, I think they're going to stay long term. It's not going to have the spikes that we saw before, but I think some of the grocery shopping and how we actually start getting our groceries is just going to change. And I think we're going to start embracing e-commerce, and also because a lot of retailers are embracing operational efficiency in terms of automation with dark stores and stuff. So that's actually going to bring the cost down in terms of just like fulfilling your e-commerce, groceries through e-commerce. So I'm actually excited about the trend. If the cost comes down, if I get what I want in a timely manner, I think that is a trend I would like to see grow, in the future. So yeah, fingers crossed on that.
So a big disruption around grocery in terms of, how people are currently engaging. That's very interesting. I think the whole idea around sort of shopping at a grocery level where people wanted to choose their steaks or choose their vegetables and everything else, the one thing this boom has done is showing that, individual personalized shoppers do that for you. So it'll be interesting to look out for. Derric?
I think it's happening now, and it's going to accelerate very quickly. What's going on in the past, and the reason we need data warehouses and tools to integrate and bring all the data was that we could look at the report and figure out what to do. In the future, the reports are going to tell us what to do. So I believe we're right here at the cusp where, and Krithika hinted at this with AI/ML models that do some of this, but the reports are predictive analytics and analytics that give us actionable insights. So we're not even looking at the graph. It's telling us what to do, right? We don't need to see the data anymore. We need to know what to do. And then the machine is telling us as the resource how to execute. And that'll happen over more in the next 24 months. And then if I can give you the 10-year prediction, the third part of that is the machine just does the predictions for you. And you monitor the system in a totally different way than how we think of it today. But giving you the 2-year one, predictive analytics, and as those predictive analytics become, more and more accurate and powerful, you can remove human from the element altogether.
I'm not sure if that's wonderful, but
I love firing people. Is what I'm saying.
No, super interesting. Donal.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we are seeing and expect to continue to grow is around like the personalization. Our customers, e-commerce companies wanting to increase their personalization for each of the customers coming in, right? So that's understanding the customers from their needs, and we're seeing the companies that are really, I guess over the last sort of 6-12 months, looking to build out these like personalization recommendation engines, etc., right? And that's again all being powered from the data warehouse, and so it's been the critical part to get the data in there. But then also like on the performance marketing side of things, I touched on earlier around like personalization of the customer lists or target lists going into ad platforms, and that these are all like they want to just get as granular as possible, and group these customers together in the same sort of similar buying patterns, whatever they may be, and they're targeting those people versus having just a broad way and a very high CAC versus having this very direct and focused, personalized. And then when they do get them onto the websites, it's having that personalized recommendations across the website, and the customers feeling like they are understood and they are seeing what they want, and also what the companies think they do want to buy in addition to that.
Before we formally denote that Integrate.io was launched, every launch event should have a special offer. So I know Donal and Krithika, you guys have been working in the background. I believe there is an incentive for early adopters to come on board. Donal, do you care to elaborate?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And so I think for the first 10 customers that come in and to do pilots on the Integrate.io platform, we have partnered up with AWS, and each of those 10 people on pilots or companies on pilots will receive a $1,000 gift card or gift credits for the AWS for their AWS spend. So please go ahead and sign up and get one of those first 10. Yeah.
Not a free trial. It's a $1,000 incentive. That changes everything. Okay. So guys, thanks very much. Thanks for your contribution today to Krithika and Derric. Thank you for taking the time. Donal, I mean, this has been super interesting. I wish you the best of luck with Integrate.io, and I guess we can say that it is formally launched. So everyone watching, we'll see you in the chat rooms. If you haven't already put your questions up, please put them up, and we'd all be happy to answer them. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.